Barnard. I'm Rona Wilk, class of 1991, and a former AABC reunion chair. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to the third edition of Morningside Memories, Alumni Tell It Like It Was, a series of interviews with alumni from the 40s and 50s to learn about their Barnard experience in the years during and directly following World War II. We'll be releasing a new video every morning of Reunion 2023. Today, we are speaking with Harriet Newman Cohen, president of the class of 1952. Harriet was born in Providence, Rhode Island, but moved to Brooklyn when she was 12 and a half, and she majored in Latin and Greek with a minor in music at Barnard. She later went on to get an MA in Latin at Bryn Mawr, and as a second act, went to Brooklyn Law School later in life, where she became an editor of the Law Review and graduated in 1974. She founded her own law firm where she specializes in family law and is one of the top lawyers in her field. And we are delighted to have her here with us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
So let's just start at the very beginning. Why did you choose Barnard?
Oh, there was never any place I was going to go but Barnard. Barnard was a dream. I wasn't going to go out of town. I was the oldest of 4 children. My parents and my siblings and myself, we were very, very close. And it was not their style to allow children to go too far from home. I didn't go to camp. They felt as though children should stay near their parents in the summertime and enjoy the summer as a family. And I wasn't going to out-of-town college because that was our MO in our house. And I think my parents continued to need me to help them with the 3 younger children, because my mom and I were always like 2 moms in the house. And as a result of which, my siblings and I, and thank goodness I still have all of them, my younger brother, my younger sisters, we are very, very close. So I didn't go away, and it was going to be Barnard because I was a very, very good student. And my parents, immigrants though they were, they knew that a very good student was going to go to Barnard.
Fantastic. One of the questions I usually ask is, was there an expectation that you would go to college, or, and was it sort of the norm in your community for girls to, after high school, go to college, or were they out working?
Oh, no. I was a Jewish girl. My parents were brilliant people. My mother from a town not far from Warsaw, my father from Ukraine, and both of them, although their educations had been truncated, they had to get out of those countries because of pogroms and get over here, but they came with brilliant minds, and they remained autodidacts their entire lives. My mother went to school later on and got a degree from one of the city colleges at the time. My father had gone to gymnasium and prided himself on knowing Latin. He knew 3 words, amo, amas, amat. And he was a very taciturn man with a Russian accent from Ukraine. And he would say to me, because I was a Latin major, he would say, amo, amas, amat. And that was how he told me he loved me. So they knew that I needed to get a good education. We were 3 girls and a boy in the family. It was always expected that all of the girls would be as highly educated as the brother. And there was never any thought in my family that I was going to be anything but a professional woman.
That's fantastic, because that was not always the case, especially if there was a boy who often got preferential
it's true
treatment, unfortunately.
Now I was to become a teacher, of course, because class of 52, and today more than half of the class at Barnard will go to medical school, to law school, to become bankers. In those days, I was on the debate team. I'm holding my mortarboard right here.
Yes.
There's a picture of myself at the edge there with together with the other. And we traveled to Yale, to Princeton, to Harvard. We won our debates. And then we became teachers and they became lawyers and doctors. That's how it was in the 1950s. We were becoming educated in order to be the most highly educated mothers so that we could raise the next generation of children to be brilliant and educated and go to school. It was not deemed in our playbook that we were going to be the doctors or the lawyers, but we did go back later. I went back 18 years later with Millicent McIntosh's voice ringing in my ears. Girls, you can be anything you want. You can do anything you want. And we saw that she had. And so this dream of mine, not to be a teacher, but to go to law school, was something that I implemented 18 years after graduating from Barnard. I felt my teaching was going to be as a professor of Latin and Greek. So I was going to become a professor like Gilbert Hyatt, who was my teacher at Columbia College. We used to go across the street. Eleanor Swallow, who was my Latin teacher on our side of the street. I would be a professor like them. I actually got credit while I was a student at Barnard for my piano lessons. I studied with a concert pianist named Frank Sheridan. He was on the faculty at Barnard, and I would go to a practice room while I was at Barnard and then have my lessons with him at Barnard, and I got 3 credits for it. And in order to graduate, I had to do a recital, a very, very fine recital at Virginia Gildersleeve Parlor. I had a large audience, and I really played magnificently well. It's amazing what young people can do. You know, it was a paradise. Going to school at Barnard was going to Shangri-La every day. I was a brown bagger. There was no housing for people who lived in Brooklyn.
Right.
But we had our own group, our own groupie or group or social media group, because another member of that debate team, one of the women in that, one of the girls, we were girls then.
Yes.
She was my neighbor. She and I had both gone to James Madison High School. And her father, when she got into Barnard, gave her a blue Chevrolet convertible. And every morning she picked up 4 or 5 Columbia and Barnard people. So we had quite a time for those 4 years. Was wonderful.
That is nice. I was going to ask about commuting and saying it was a bit of a schlep from Brooklyn.
It was a long, well, and yes.
But
so,
not necessarily in a blue convertible. I mean, if
well,
you're going to go in style.
And there was a West Side Highway in those days, on an elevated West Side Highway. So we would come up on the Belt Parkway and then go on the West Side Highway, and we were there within an hour. But I traveled home on the train, on the subway. And Mr. Sheridan, my piano teacher, told me to always carry my music with me because he wanted me to memorize intellectually, not through muscle memory. He said, when you play in a recital, you will possibly have anxiety and lose your muscle memory. But if you learn it intellectually, memorize it on the train, you're not going to forget your music. Amazing, just amazing teachers.
That's fantastic. Did your friend park? We should note that back then 118th Street still ran through.
That's right.
The campus, and there were parking spots right there in front of the tennis courts.
That's right. It was always a feat every morning trying to help find a parking spot. I think there were times, I recall her driving on a sidewalk once because there was very bad traffic in the middle of the street and we were all late for classes. She just went right up on the sidewalk and found herself a spot somewhere at the end of the street. Those were wonderful days, just wonderful days.
So you've mentioned a few of your professors. Are there any others that stand out?
Well, I mentioned Gilbert Hyatt. He is number 1 in my mind. He was an author, a professor. He was a showman of Latin. When he taught us these very complicated, it was very, very high level classics. His classroom was like theater. It was like nothing else that I've ever experienced in my life. He was a born teacher. He wrote a book called The Art of Teaching. He wrote quite a few books. And he was very handsome man. He was married to a very strong, magnificent woman named Helen McInnes, who was a very important writer of spy stories, I believe. He had been a boarder in her family's home. He came from Scotland and he spoke with a beautiful Scottish accent. So he was the star. He was the leading star. My music professors were totally amazing. I had a professor, well, I had a professor Usachevsky, Vladimir Usachevsky, and other professors who were very in the forefront of atonal and electronic music. There were big things happening in the 50s in music, and I
Oh,
was
yeah.
on the cutting edge by being there. So my
And
music,
Columbia was a hotbed
yes,
of musical innovation, and they had their opera theater workshop, and
it was,
Douglas Moore was there for a number
yes,
of
Douglas
years.
Moore was there. There was Professor Doris was there in the music department. It was wonderful. It was just wonderful. Everything about Barnard was wonderful.
You were on the debate team.
Yeah.
It- were there, I mean, the issues that you debated, did they reflect the politics, the social movements of the time? I mean, was
How
there agitation
interesting.
on campus? I mean, we know that by the end of the 60s, there would be a lot of that.
It's very interesting. The 50s were a kind of a calmer time. One of the biggest issues we girls had were that there was to be no premarital sex
Mm,
because when it happened, the girls got pregnant. When the girls got pregnant, they became pariahs. They did not stay in school. I had a wonderful classmate at Barnard, and she got pregnant, and I don't know whether she was allowed to stay, but she didn't stay. There
mm.
was a terrible stigma to pregnancy. And honestly, the biggest birth control pill in those days was the fear of premarital pregnancy. We were considered to be damaged goods when that happened. That was the expression that was used.
Yeah.
And it worked. People were very, very careful, and they did not have premarital sex. What was being discussed at that time, however, and my friend from the debate committee, from the debate team, and myself, we were on the radio, or maybe it was early television, and the debate was between these two Barnard women. We were called girls in those days, of
Right.
career or homemaker. I, of
Mm.
course, took the position homemaker, and I believed in it very strongly. I came to change later. She took the position career. She believed in it very strongly, and we debated each other for about a half an hour. Though that was one of the big issues on campus at the time, was should women have careers? Can you believe it?
As a historian, yes, I can believe it. As a person, it just is still remarkable to me.
Yeah.
Now, when you were in law school, I mean, obviously, if you had gone to law school directly after college, that was a very there were limited opportunities for that. But even in the early 70s, there was still a sense of, being in the minority among
Yes.
your law school class, or, sometimes schools like Harvard or Yale would have a specific place set aside for like a Smith
Yeah.
applicant, Wellesley applicant.
Yeah. So the same was true at Brooklyn Law School. When I first arrived, the women all sat in one section.
Mm.
That changed while I was there. We were 10% of the class. The very first woman who was ever hired to teach at Brooklyn Law School was hired when we arrived. I
Oh,
arrived
nice.
in 1971. Of course, we made the law review in much greater numbers than 10%. The law review began to be dominated by women because the women students were fabulous students. And law school was amazing. We had amazing teachers.
Coming out of high school, presumably during World War II, I, were you all aware of what was happening in Europe? Did you do any kind of war work as high schoolers or junior high schoolers?
That's a great question. So I graduated from high school in 1949. So it was a few years after the war. I discovered during reunion times that some of my classmates actually had lived through the war and were Jewish girls who had lost their families, were at Barnard. I didn't know it at the time. I remember one in particular who kept it hidden,
Mm.
didn't want anybody to know about what her background was. I learned that later during alumni years.
Mm.
She finally spoke. And also we had people who had served we had a WAC in our class,
Oh,
Women's Army Corps.
right,
And she
right. The
became,
GI Bill was an equal
yeah,
opportunity.
sure. So there weren't too many women who had served in the Army or in the armed forces and then came to Barnard. But I learned during reunion years that one of my classmates had been a WAC.
Oh, wow.
So it was very exciting. So I think I became a divorce lawyer for a few reasons. I was very, very good at the subject in law school. I had an affinity for it.
Mhm.
Somebody said to me, "Oh, you're on the law review." Somebody who was interviewing me or mentoring me and said, "Whatever you do, do not go into the field of family law because that's where the women go. And you know, with your brain, go into corporate, go into whatever."
Mhm.
And I think I said, and then I was going through this divorce and I felt, I'm really good at this. I can hear the music. I'm psychological. I have this Barnard background, which is so deeply intellectual. And people who are going through this kind of a period in time, they need a therapist. I'm the therapist. They
Yeah.
need help with how they're going to handle their children. I'm awfully good at that. People ask me why I don't, stop. And am I still on top of my game? And I have to tell you, in all frankness, and not to be stuck up or anything, I am better at it than I ever was. The wisdom that comes with the years and the experience, it's for real. It's for real. And I still love my profession and my clients love me. So it's been great. And of course, the Barnard background in it, it's in my heart, my mind, my work. Every single day, I'm a great writer. That's because of Barnard. I'm a great thinker. I can see an end game. It's all Barnard. Barnard did that.
And I think that is a great place to end.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a delight. And we will see you all at the next Morningside Memories. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to be interviewed by you, Rona. Thank you so
Oh, thank you.